Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar. Today's webinar is about electronic signatures and particularly about legally binding electronic signatures. This has been a question or something that's come up quite a lot recently, maybe to an extent, more so because of all the remote work due to the pandemic. People still need to get contracts, paperwork, purchase orders, various things signed, and they want to know. Many of our customers have asked us, hey, how do we set up Frevo forms and workflows with signatures, electronic signatures, so that they're legally binding? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, show you a demo of the product itself and how you can set these up, and then give you a little preview of a change, a little feature that we're upgrading to make it easier to collect these. And I have my colleagues Will and Megan on the call with me. They'll be answering any questions. If you have any questions, you should see a control panel, something similar to this. You may not have all these tabs here, but in there's a questions tab. Feel free to ask questions by typing in there. If Megan may answer the question directly, or we can hold some of those questions for the end of the webinar as well. What I plan to do here is a really fast, literally 45-second, 60-second overview of Frevo itself as a whole, because there are a few people on the call who I think are new to Frevo, what the product does, and then really go into legally binding signatures, explain a little bit about what exactly makes a signature, electronic signature, legally binding, and a little bit of the infrastructure that goes under it, and then dive into a demo and hopefully some time for questions. So very quickly here, this is not going to take a whole lot of time. What does Frevo do? We sell software, both cloud and on-premise software, for automating your workflows. It's very simple, 100% visual, very easy to use, and it's being used by hundreds of customers every day to digitize routine administrative tasks, schools collecting consent forms or permission forms from parents, purchase orders, invoice approvals, new hire onboarding, travel requests, timesheets, so on and so forth across.
Hey, Ashish, can I interrupt real quick? Could you share your screen?
Oh, am I not sharing it? I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Important bit. Thanks, Megan. Well, luckily we haven't really gone too far here. The previous slide was showing you how you can find the questions tab, by the way, in that GoToWebinar control panel. It's right here, something labeled questions. Thanks, Megan, again. Sorry about that. And we have customers using Frevo without requiring a significant amount of IT resources to automate their forms and workflows across a wide variety of verticals, so all kinds of sizes, some huge companies down to much smaller organizations as well. Really, if you can use Excel, you can automate your processes, you can set up dynamic behavior. We have a very powerful visual rule builder and so on and so forth. We have a large, diverse customer base. I'm sure many of the names here are familiar to you. We have a lot of customers in the higher education space, universities, big and small, community colleges, K-12 school districts, some very large ones like Boston Public Schools, Escondido Union, to smaller school districts and private schools as well. Number of government entities all over the world, and a variety of customers across other industries as well, our wide variety of verticals. And then lastly, what do they do with it? They use it for a really wide variety of workflows. I mentioned some of these, all the way from new hire onboarding, purchase orders, vacation requests, travel authorization, invoice approval, expense claims, timesheets, and so on and so forth. And you can find a lot of these examples if you go to our website, if you're interested. Go to frevo.com, go to resources, templates, and on the left side here you'll see a variety of examples. You can click on any of them and try a simple template example of a workflow or form built with Frevo that's live, that's running. Some of these have SQL integration. They have all kinds of features that you can display. And then the last thing about the product in general is, we have a really complete solution with some significant, strong enterprise-grade features. Obviously, the most important one for today's purposes is legally binding electronic signatures. How do you collect these electronic digital signatures with Frevo? But you really have a whole array of functions and capabilities in Frevo that allow you to automate really real world, even the most complex business processes within your organization, including the ability to integrate with your existing security infrastructure like Active Directory, SAML, Google, etc. We do also provide our built-in authentication framework into Frevo. Certainly drag and drop form and workflow design without any coding. We have powerful integration capabilities with SQL databases, a wide variety of document management systems, SharePoint, Google Apps, RESTful web services, GET, POST, etc. We also have built-in accessibility, so the system can be used very easily to create forms and workflows that are ADA or WCAG compliant. You can generate PDFs, including government ones like a US federal W-4 or I-9 or state W-4s. We just had a webinar on that as well, and we have videos that can show you how you can use Frevo to generate these PDFs, including copying these electronic signatures to those PDFs. So you can have a new hire onboarding with a secure electronic signature. And that signature can be copied over to a federal W-4 and submitted to the federal government. Certainly very dynamic. You can create visual business logics. We have built-in reports as well as a really cool new dashboarding feature coming out soon, for which there will be a webinar in due course. Built-in Audit Trail for compliance, very powerful instantaneous validation for accurate data collection. You can use it all over the world. We have customers all over the world in, I don't know how many, but a large number of countries that are using Frevo in a number of languages, including right-to-left languages like Arabic. Certainly mobile friendly. Frevo just automatically works on all devices, and we also offer flexible deployment options, cloud or on-premise software. It's the exact same software, same set of features, but you can deploy it in your data center if you prefer, or use our cloud environment. Now on to the main topic of today, legally binding electronic signatures. So I'm going to go through a brief introduction to these legally binding signatures, what makes them legally binding, before jumping into a demo in just about 5 minutes. So electronic signatures and the validity and legality of these electronic signatures, the foundation for that is a couple of landmark federal laws. E-sign and UETA, forget what that exactly stands for, but they've been legally binding in the United States and most of the world, for that matter, for about 20 years. As long as you collect these signatures and meet in a manner that meets certain criteria, which we'll delve into briefly, that are set up by these two landmark laws. Now, these laws have been adopted in the United States, and UETA has been adopted by I think 47 states plus Puerto Rico, Washington D.C., and Guam, and the three other states that are not included in there have essentially identical state laws on the books. So essentially makes electronic signatures legally binding all over the United States. As I mentioned, also these signatures are also essentially legally binding in almost all countries of the world as well. So there is a strong legal framework for these electronic signatures. Now, one thing that we have been asked many times, I just want to clarify exactly what is the difference between an electronic signature and a digital signature. And they're similar, but sometimes they're used interchangeably, but they're not identical, at least in my opinion. So an electronic signature really, it's really defined. If you look at the laws that I quoted earlier, it's really pretty much a way to sign a document without pen and paper, to sign some data. Can be an image of your signature that's dropped onto a PDF using Adobe. In some cases, you can use a sound. So for example, if for ADA compliance, if the person is legally blind, you can, for example, allow them to sign by using a sound, a symbol. Really, there isn't any limitation here. Any way to sign a document without actually physically using a pen and ink on paper is considered an electronic signature. Now, a digital signature is a kind of electronic signature. It's a category of electronic signatures, not as broad, that uses some sort of specific technical protocol to secure that signature. The most common one used by Frevo as well as large e-sign companies like DocuSign is typically PKI, public key infrastructure, and digital certificates. And why do you care about that? What does PKI really do? I mean, under the covers, a lot of stuff, and we're going to briefly delve into that in the next couple of slides. But ultimately, PKI helps to reliably identify the signer, who's signing the form, and it helps to secure the data, those electronic transactions, from tampering. So when I sign a document using PKI infrastructure and you receive that digitally signed document, you can validate that and verify that the contents of the document have not been altered. And both are important factors to make an e-signature actually legally binding. So in 60 seconds, what exactly is PKI and how the heck do these digital signatures actually work? And something that's confusing. There's a lot of messaging out there that's it's hard to figure out exactly how these things work. So I thought a brief explanation here. There's just a few terms in here that are relevant. There's a lot of terminology here, but I think these are the four most important things to know. The first thing is a hash, and that's basically just a string. It's essentially a mathematical function that generates a fixed length of zeros and ones from arbitrary data. You can have data that's a paragraph or gigabytes long, and the hash function will boil it all down to a fixed length string of zeros and ones, 256 characters, 512, 1024, whatever, some sort of fixed length number depending on the hash function. And then there's the notion of public and private keys. These is essentially a pair of keys generated for an entity. It could be an individual, it can be a website, it can be an organization. So for example, if you go up to this website, Google website, you'll see that there's a certificate in here and all kinds of stuff over here that's issued by GTS, CAs, and so on and so forth. Embedded in that certificate will be the public key for that organization, in this case, Google. The public key, as its name indicates, is public. Anyone can get that public key. And the private key, as its name indicates, is generally kept private. You don't want to share your private key with anyone. And then there's the next thing down there is a certificate authority, which we saw in that certificate there, and essentially certifies that the public key is real. It belongs to, in this case, if I look at the certificate, it's going to be the trust is set up out here. And it can basically tell you who has certified that, some sort of certificate authority has certified and issued a digital certificate, which is the next thing down here, and says, here's the public key for the entity, Google in this case, that's named on this form. So these are sort of the four terms. There's a hash, there's a public and private key, there's an authority framework that certifies these keys, and then issues something called the digital certificate, kind of like a passport, and says, here's the entity, here's their public key, and I certify that this is who they say it is. And so how does all this work to digitally sign a document? Bear with me here, I'm gonna explain this, this picture. On the left side here, you start with your data. This can be anything. This can be a section in a Frevo form. It can be a giant 500-page document, be anything at all. You use the first thing that I mentioned earlier, the hash function, a mathematical function. What it does is it boils that document, that data down into a fixed length strings of zeros and ones. I mean, I've only shown a few here. Typically, it's way longer. But in the end, there's a fixed length string of zeros and ones called the hash. That hash function, that string is then encrypted using my private key. If I'm going to send you a message, I'm going to use my private key, which is only I know. I'm going to encrypt that hash and generate essentially another string of zeros and ones, which is my signature. Now, one of the things about the hash is that the data the hash depends on the data. So even if a single character changes in that data, the hash function that's generated will be completely different. So you can be sure that two pieces of data will never generate the exact same hash. Then you take the signature that's been generated by encrypting it with the private key, add my digital certificate, which I've obtained from somebody, this trusted certificate authority, has my public key in it, combine the two, attach it to the document or the data, and now I've got digitally signed data, which I can then send to you. What that means is I've sent you my data, my document, I've sent you the signature, this string of zeros and ones, and I've sent you the certificate, which embeds my public key. Now you can use these three pieces of information to validate all this stuff, and that's on the right-hand side. You receive that digitally signed data, you take the data itself, you apply the exact same hash function. This is a publicly known thing embedded in here, SHA1, MD5, whatever the hash function is. You apply the same mathematical function and you generate that hash. Remember what I told you earlier, that hash is guaranteed to be unique, and it's going to be based on that data. And then you take the signature, which is also sent to you. You take the public key, which was also sent to you in the certificate, and the certificate authority has said this is the valid public key. And you can decrypt that signature and generate the hash that was originally used to encrypt, to generate the signature. And then you just compare the two. So if the two hashes are equal, then you can be sure that the document is valid, not a single character in that document has been modified, and that my signature is valid, and that in fact that document has been signed by me, the signer. So there's a lot of framework behind the scenes here. Of course, there are products and libraries that hide a lot of the details from here, but fundamentally, this is how digitally signing documents and data with public key infrastructure works. Okay, so now back to the legally binding question. So what exactly makes these electronic signatures legally binding? And there are a number of factors in here. Remember what I said earlier is that these signatures have been legally binding for 20 years, provided you meet certain criteria. So here are the main criteria that you need to meet here. The first, one of the most important ones, is intent to sign. How can I prove that the person who signed this actually intended to sign this document? How can I reliably identify it, that it was actually signed by me? Disclosure and consent. So you need to disclose to the person that they are electronically signing. Normally, it's a good idea in this case to also provide them with an alternative, saying, look, if you don't want to digitally or electronically sign, we can do this another way. Obviously, electronic capture kind of goes without saying, otherwise it won't be an electronic signature. You have to secure that transaction from tampering, which means the data must be safe and secure, which is where PKI comes in. Retention of those documents. So you want to, for obvious reasons, you want to retain the digitally signed data or documents. Access, you need to be able to provide access to both parties, or all signatories actually. It could be digitally signed by any number of people. Everybody should have access to that. And finally, an audit trail for all these transaction actions. So that's a lot of stuff to really make sure that these things are legally binding. So I've tried to boil this down to a table over here and really explain the types of electronic signatures. This is more Frevo specific. So we have 3 different types of things: a signature field, email verification, and identity verification, with obviously identity verification being the most secure. Now, there are things beyond this also, things like Adobe and Microsoft, where you might digitally sign a document using a personal certificate. Very important for super secure, like military transactions, things of that nature, where you have a physical electronic card that you plug into a laptop that has your personal digital certificate embedded in it. And then nowadays, in extremely sensitive situations, you also have biometric signatures and things of that sort. So I'm not going to go there and discuss, because the implementation of those is extremely complex. But otherwise, you have a basic signature field. Just drag and drop a signature field onto a form or workflow. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then you have the 2 on the right, email and identity verification, are both digital signatures, which do use PKI PKI infrastructure to actually generate those hash functions and protect the data from tampering. You can establish intent to sign in any of these areas. Signature field or email verification, you kind of have to rely on email for that. That's why it's hard to say that party has been reliably identified if all you have is a signature field or an email. Emails can be spoofed or intercepted, but by and large, I think the email verification. So DocuSign is a big vendor that uses email verification. Essentially, there are just literally millions, billions of documents that have been signed in this manner. So it's almost definitely going to be legally binding. And to be fair, courts, certainly in the United States, have ruled over and over again for the legality of electronic signatures, and they've often used an email exchange or an SMS, a text messages that have been sent between the parties to basically prove intent to sign. But if you want to be super secure, really certain about the legality, you want to verify the identity of the person who's signing. With Frevo, we provide you a mechanism to verify the identity of the signer without requiring that person to have a digital certificate of public and private keys of their own. And that is essentially the difficulty with PKI infrastructure, that it's a nuisance. It's a pain for people, individual people, to have and maintain their own public and private keys and digital certificates. And of course, then you got another layer, which is you got to protect the security of those private keys. I don't have my own digital certificate and public-private key pair, and I would venture to guess that almost nobody on the webinar has their own personal digital certificate, private key, public key, and so on and so forth. If you do, that's great. You can certainly sign documents using your own keys, using things like Adobe. So now I'm going to jump into a quick demo and show you how you can use these, all of these three types of signatures in Frevo. So the first thing here is I've just got a simple field trip permission slip, something that I think is pretty common in schools. You've got permission slips and consent forms. So this is a relatively simple one. It's just a field trip permission. I've got parent, guardian, first name, last name, student, first name, last name, some basic stuff in here. And in Frevo here, you've got a signature control. So I'm going to take the signature, I'm going to drag it and drop it here. We'll call it, I don't know, something like that. I'll just add a couple of little bells and whistles here. Call the signature date, make that 4 columns wide. I'm going to disable that, make that signature required. And then I'll add a little business rule here that just automatically populates this signature date, because it's such a common thing that people do. I'll run this rule builder here and say when please sign here is filled, we are going to set up the signature date to today, I guess. And otherwise, we will set the signature date to empty. Simple rule saying that when somebody signs, put in the date. If the signature is removed, clear the date. And that's it. So we've created the form. We put in a signature. We put in a signature date. This is sort of the simple signature field only. I'm going to save this form and close it. And then I'm going to go open this in a different browser just to make sure that I'm not logged in. So right here, am I logged into Frevo? Let's just make sure you're not. No, I'm not logged in. So this is just, this could be a consent form, a contact form, not a contact form, a consent form that's deployed on a school's website, for example. And anybody can go there, simply click on the link in here. Up comes the form and say, okay, I'm going to type in, let's say it's good old John Adams. And the student is his son. And I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to sign. I'm just using my mouse. You can also certainly do this with your with the touch screen and your finger on a mobile device, like an iPad or a phone. Much easier to sign. Signed in here, and I can show you. Simply click on the just look at the PDF of this. If I download the print view for this, you can see here that Frevo has generated a PDF. The data, obviously, from the permission slip is in here, and the signature is also available in here. And then when this form is submitted, the signed permission slip can either go by email to the school, or can go into a document management system, or however you want to save this information. So this is one way of collecting consent signatures. It's very similar to sending a piece of paper back home with your kid and getting the parent to sign a permission slip. Lots of schools do this. Is it strictly legally binding? I think most people think for sure that it is. But as you saw, I wasn't logged in. Anyone really, I could have literally clicked on the school's website, downloaded the form, or clicked on the link and signed as the parent without really, there's no way to really identify that the person who signed the form is the person who claims to have signed the form. Now, a lot of vendors and form providers do provide this kind of signature and certainly present it as being legally binding. And once again, maybe it's legally binding, but there's no way to really reliably identify the party, nor do I have any mechanism to secure that data from tampering. So I don't really know that the document could be changed under the covers later. You would have no way to know that. Okay, so what's the alternative? So in that situation, Frevo provides a couple of other alternatives. If you have a need for your signatures to be more legally binding, or you have a little more security around those things. Here's a simple workflow that I've created. Goes from employee to manager to vendor. It's I think it's a PO. Yeah, it's a basic purchase order process. A simple purchase order process. We haven't added a lot of bells and whistles to the form and the workflow here because the emphasis here is more on signatures. The first step is the employee who sends it to his or her manager. When you go to the manager step, you'll see under assignment here that it's been assigned to a specific user. So I'm logged in as whoever I am. I think it's Tom. And this thing will then, when I fill out this form, and I'm going to show you the form in a second, as the employee, I'm going to then route that, the system will route that form to my manager, a specific user within the system. And the manager can only access that form if you're authenticated, logged into the system. And then the third step here is to a vendor. And this assignment is simply done by email. So this is going to an email address, in this case, frevo.tutorial, whatever, the email address doesn't matter. You can route this anonymously by email outside the organization to a vendor. A super common situation. A lot of customers have encountered this, asked about it, and we use the same exact mechanism in our own sales orders or contracts for that matter. So a really common scenario. Let's take a look at the form itself. Pretty simple here. I've got a section called order information. These things at the top, first name, last name, and manager ID will be filled in automatically by the system. I've got a table. I can add some documents. Let's add a signature here. So I'm going to click on this section here. Now in Frevo, you can add a digital signature to any section. You can add as many digital signatures as you want because you can have as many sections as you want. So in this particular case, this section is going to be filled in by the employee. So I'm going to click on the section, then I'm going to click on security here, and then I'm going to click on this text/signature image, and then click on must sign. So so what happens here is, sorry. Okay, so what happens here is that assign this section button has appeared down below, and you can see that a little signature panel has appeared at the bottom of the section. And we're going to run this workflow, and you can see how that that section will automatically get signed using the first name as last name of the employee who is signing. Now, the next section here, the section below here, is for manager approval. And if you remember in the workflow routing, we set it up so that the workflow will route to my manager for approval. And that manager is somebody that I know. I can identify who that manager is. So I can click security over here. I'm going to basically use the same signature. In this case, I'm going to click on this wet signature and click on must sign again. And you'll see how, again, the manager can digitally sign this section, but it's just a slightly different format. You have the ability to draw the signature out. And then the last thing is the vendor signature here. This vendor section is only going to be visible on the last step, but it's being routed by email. So if I were to set up a digital signature here and click on must sign, you'll see that we'll take a look at what happens when this workflow reaches the vendor step and was routed by email. So I'm going to save and close this. I'm going to run save test actually. So this was the purchase order. So I'm going to just click this little test icon here. And you see that the PO number, PO date, first name, last name, manager ID were automatically generated. So the manager ID is Jerry. So I'm going to order some red widgets. I'll order 13 of them at $75.90. And then I'll order some blue widgets. Let's say they cost $65.77. Oops. Sorry, that's there's a quantity here. Well, you can see how system validates automatically. Quantities can't have decimals. I've got a unit price. I can click on add files here, and I'll just choose some text file in here. I can upload that. And then when I click sign this section here, Frevo knows who I am. And I'm logged in as a particular user. It knows my first name, it knows my last name, it knows who I am in here. So when you click sign this section here, Frevo will digitally sign this section on my behalf. So what it's doing, getting back to this little document here, is it's doing all this stuff here to sign it. It's generating a hash function based on the data in here, that there were red widgets and here was the price, and all of the data in here is encoded in the hash function that's generated here by Frevo. It's encrypted using a private key, but this is Frevo's private key. So the server has its own private key, public key, private key digital certificate embedded in it. It's encrypting it using the public key, attaching the digital signature, and generating this digitally signed, this digital signature, and carrying it along with the workflow. So instead of Tom having to sign this using Tom's own digital signature, private key, public key pair, it's essentially a two-step process where Frevo has said, I'm going to sign this on behalf of Tom, but I'm going to certify essentially that I've validated the identity here. I made sure that Tom's the only person who was logged in and who could have signed this section. And then I click send to manager. It's going to go off to the manager, who I'm sure was Jerry. So now I'm going to go to a different browser here. I'm going to log in as the user Jerry. And here's Jerry. Okay, yeah. So I logged in as Jerry here. You can see that I've got a task list. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. I got a purchase order from Tom for a certain amount, and I need to go off and validate it. Sorry, it's zoomed, so it's showing up down below. You can see here that I can look at this order information section, but I can't change anything in here. That's because it's been digitally signed by Tom. And you can see that there's a green bar appearing down below indicating that the signature is valid and none of the data in there has been changed. Obviously, if I were to make a change and change the quantity to 14 in here, the signature would not be valid anymore. Because remember, I mentioned to you that even if you change a single character in the data, the hash changes. So the underlying verification process would generate two different hashes that did not match, and Frevo would say, wait a minute, there's something fishy going on here. I'm going to turn this green banner red and display an error message, so you know for sure that this data has been tampered with. In this case, because the banner is green, the data, Jerry knows that this data is definitely valid. And I can do the same thing. I can approve this purchase, put in a comment in here, do the same thing similar to Tom. I'm going to click sign this section. The difference here is because we selected wet signature, you're going to get this box appear here. I'm going to just, oops, sorry. Just sign it. You can see that the image of the signature is displayed in here. And I'm going to send this off to the vendor. So now in this case, I've now routed this by email to the vendor using this email address, frevo.tutorials. Oh, come on. Okay. So you can see that the email has arrived in my inbox as the vendor. So I can access it. Oh, obviously this message can be customized to be as detailed as you want, but I can access that PO using this link here. So once again, I've accessed it. I can see it. Can't change anything in here because that would be tampering. Can't change anything in here because that would be tampering again. I can add my own comments here as the vendor. But in this version of Frevo here, when I click on sign this section here, I'm going to have to log in. So this is obviously not going to work because I don't have an account on the system. I can't log in. So I can't use this digital signature by email with this email verification feature in this current version of Frevo that I've deployed. So what we've done here is we've added the ability to digitally sign an email routed section. It's not yet deployed to this server here, but that's why I asked my colleague Will to join me. Will, are you on?
I am.
Okay, can you share your screen and show the
Yes.
the new capability? Okay.
So do you see my screen?
I do.
And you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So yes, as Ashish mentioned, this is actually a newer version of Frevo that hasn't been released yet, where we've solved that problem. So just real quick, again, we're in the workflow designer in Frevo, and we're looking at a two-step workflow. This is again another like a simple work order I created. The first step is completed by somebody in your organization. They put out some information, and then they're going to route it to somebody external via the email address to sign. So just to give you some context, this looks very similar in many ways to what Ashish just created. There's this section here for some work details, some basic information. There's a contract approval section that the third party will use to sign. And again, just like what he showed you, if you look at this section, we can see the security is on, and I've got a wet signature here. And this second step is actually assigned to second step is assigned to an email address. And this is this customer email. This is a template that's actually referencing back to the control on this form. Okay, so let me just I'm going to do the same thing that she did real quick. I'm going to start this off by using the quick test window. Okay, and again, just like for him, this has been set up to pre-fill some information based on who I am. I'll put some information about the work, and then where do I want to route this to? Put the email. I click continue. Okay, I can see a link to this work order has been emailed to will@frevo.com. So this is really part of the kind of verification process, if you think about it, using digital signatures with email. Email verification is one of the accepted means for doing this. And basically what that means is you send that person the email address with a special link, they click it, and it's like, okay, the assumption is they only have access to that email address. So if I jump into my email, I will see, yes, I have a new work order, and as you said mentioned before, you can change this text. So now when I click on this link, this is just similar to what Ashish was doing before. I can see the work details, contract approval, comments. Now previously, when you signed, we only had one way to verify your identity, which is you must log into the system with an account. You saw that. But since I've already sent an email, click that email, okay, we know we can trust that you are who you said you are. So now when you click, oops, I got to put a comment in, right? This is required. Contract looks good.
Hey, Will, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Hey, Will, I just wanted to add one quick note over there. One of the other things you can see here is that the language up there clearly indicates there's disclosure and consent that's being obtained as well for an electronic signature. One of the other requirements of making sure that these things are legally binding. Thanks.
Correct. That's right. I should have mentioned that this additional text here for consent has been added. Now, once you click sign, now what we're going to do is, in addition to the wet signature, we want you to provide some additional information. I need to provide the email that was used, and this is actually going to be checked against the task to make sure it matches. I'll provide my first name and last name. And now I can sign. Click done. And there we go. And now we have an email verified digital signature. A couple other details or changes to point out is now we're also including an indicator that this section was digitally signed and also the way it was digitally signed. So this says email verified, for example. If this was done the way Ashish said previously, where it was assigned to like my manager and that person was logged in, I had to know, it would say digitally signed, identity verified. And then another additional change is the introduction of this unique identifier, or displaying it to you. We already have this behind the scenes, but now we're exposing it. When Ashish did his little primer on digital signatures, you know, one of the data that's included in the signature affects that hash that you create. And so one of the requirements is that you always include and generate a unique identifier every time you sign. So even if it's signed by the same person with the same exact data, same comment, whatever fields you put in here, every single time you actually sign, it's a completely different transaction. So that's why we're actually going to expose this now so that you can see it. And it can also serve as an indicator if you're looking at, two different snapshots of the form in time, and you can see that that value is different. You know something, you know that it was signed again. So anyway, so that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically it. I guess back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Will.
No problem.
I'm gonna make myself the presenter again. Can you see my screen? It should just show demo electronic signatures.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, yeah, that's really all we have over here. We walked through what makes these things digitally these digital signatures legally binding, and showed you how we're gonna you can create them today with Frevo in just a few weeks. Once this feature that Will has demonstrated is through QA, you'll be able to create these legally binding or digital signatures with document verification and route them by email as well. This version that what he showed you will be available both in cloud as well as for on-premise customers. And then finally, before we see if there are any questions and answer those questions, I just wanted to point you can go to our website here, and essentially under resources, click on blog, or just go to our blog, and you'll see that there's a recent post on what makes electronic signatures legally binding that does have quite a bit of the content that we covered today, and in even more great and gory detail on exactly what every one of these things, every single one of these things means. You can watch a little video and really take a look at how you can do some of these things in Frevo. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. Megan, are there any questions that we can answer?
So, oh, there we go. You can hear me okay.
Yes.
We have looks like quite a bit of excitement about the email verification feature and some questions on when it will be released.
It is, as you can see, it has already been developed. We're basically going to QA it. This is part of a release that includes a couple of other features as well. So we want to make sure that it is robust. I think it's scheduled for just a few weeks, 4 or 5 more weeks. So not a whole lot longer. I have Paul, our QA person, head of QA on the call, but I don't know the exact date. But go ahead, Will.
I was going to say end of May.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the target. That's the target.
Okay. So fairly soon.
Fairly soon.
Super. Now we have a question about authentication. Can I use my existing Active Directory to authenticate users in Frevo?
Yes. So you can configure Frevo. You can configure a tenant in Frevo's cloud or on your on-premise system and set it up, connect it to Active Directory, to Microsoft Azure Active Directory in the cloud, Google, Okta, any sort of SAML providers, other LDAP directories. I believe we even have a database security manager. Not 100% sure of that, but I think so. And one of the things actually that brings up a good point. One of the questions that I've sometimes been asked on prospect calls here is, what about multi-factor authentication? How can I make sure that, can I use MFA basically? And typically, a lot of customers do use MFA when they use a provider like Microsoft or Google or Okta or any sort of SAML provider to do that authentication for them. So we certainly have customers using Frevo, using those mechanisms to authenticate to Frevo that use MFA, multi-factor authentication as well. Okay.
Super. We might have already seen this on the workflow example, but can you have multiple signatures on a form? I think this refers to like co-signers or a signature and a witness.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can have as many sections as you want on the form, and as many of those, every one of them can have its own digital signature. Or of course, if you want to use the signature control, the field, just drag and drop a signature field from palette, you can put as many of those as you want on the form. I'm not sure. Can you put a signature in a repeat? Megan, you might know that actually.
No.
No. Okay, so you can have as many signature controls as you want on your form.
Okay. And then how much does the authenticated signature feature cost? Is there a separate cost for
No,
that?
there's no cost. There's no additional cost, I should say. It's built in. It comes with it's included with your cloud or on-premise license. There's no limit on the number of signatures you can collect. So $0 is essentially the additional cost. And certainly no per signature cost or anything of that sort at all. It's a good question. It has come up a few times in calls with customers as well.
All right, super. I think that wraps up the questions that we've got.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We have recorded this webinar. You will get an email in the next few days with a link to the recording as well. We have that blog article on our blog, details article on what makes these things legally binding. And of course, we'd love to talk to you if you have any questions, would like to learn more about it. Just go to our website. There's a contact form. You can get a demo, the many ways to contact us. Or you can certainly send an email to info@frevo.com or even pick up the phone and call that number that you see on your screen. Thank you very much, and see you next time.